Good morning, everyone, dear candidate, members of the reading committee, supervisors, colleagues and friends and family from all over the world, I assume. I hereby open this academic session in which Min Wu will defend her academic thesis entitled The Modulation of Consciousness with Acoustic-Electric Stimulation. And I kindly invite you now to give us a summary of your great work. Thanks.
Dear Prorector, dear committee and supervisors, dear colleagues and friends, dear family, thank you for joining me today. Over the next 15 minutes, I will be presenting my research on modulating consciousness with acoustic-electric stimulation. Consciousness is a critical aspect of our daily lives, so it allows us to be aware of ourselves and surroundings. But consciousness is not a constant state. It varies throughout the day. When we wake up in the morning, we are from sleep to fully awake. After lunch, we may experience drowsiness and a decrease in alertness. In the evening, our consciousness diminishes again, but some people have the experience of lucid dreaming when consciousness has entered and we become aware of our dream state. Consciousness consists of two dimensions, arousal and awareness. Arousal refers to the state of being alert. Awareness is the ability to perceive and process the external environment and our internal thoughts. The different combinations of the two dimensions constitute various states of consciousness. For example, the deep sleep, drowsiness, or consciousness wakefulness. Next, let's shift our focus to pathological unconsciousness, which are commonly caused by stroke, traumatic brain injury, or cardiac arrest, or toxication. Based on the two-dimension models we mentioned before, pathological unconsciousness can be divided into several states, such as coma, unresponsive wakefulness syndrome, or minimally conscious state. A coma is the most severe state of unconsciousness, while unresponsive wakefulness syndrome, formerly known as vegetative state, describes patients perceive wakefulness but without awareness. In contrast, patients in minimally conscious state display fluctuating levels of awareness. Collectively, minimally conscious state and UWS are referred to as disorders of consciousness. Pathological unconsciousness often arises from severe brain injury, which can occur in different brain regions, such as the prefrontal cortex, posterior area, thalamus, or ascending reticular activating system. The location and extent of the brain injury can significantly influence the patient's consciousness levels. This has also further led to the various theories of consciousness. Patients with disorders of consciousness can retain in this state for years or even decades. Such a long duration imposes significant economic burden on both the healthcare system and patient's family. Moreover, the unconscious state can highly affect the life quality of this patient. This problem all calls for effective methods for consciousness restoration as related to treatment of DLC patients. Current approach to the restoration of consciousness include a variety of pharmacological treatment, such as zolpidem. Additionally, electromagnetic stimulation is increasingly being used, such as the deep brain stimulation, the invasive stimulation of thalamus, or the non-invasive stimulation, such as transcranial stimulation or transcutaneous stimulation. Besides the electromagnetic stimulation, there's also sensory stimulation, such as the music stimulation or exposure to familiar speech. Both the transcutaneous stimulation and auditory stimulation, they are bottom-up stimulation, which first stimulate the peripheral nerve, then project to thalamus, then to the cortex. Actually, there are multiple types of peripheral nerve stimulation, such as the stimulation of vagal nerve, median nerve, or trigeminal nerve. According to the proposed vagal cortical pathway, stimulating the vagal nerve can activate the trigeminal nucleus, which in turn activates the thalamus and sensory cortex. However, trigeminal nerve stimulation can more directly stimulate the trigeminal nucleus in the brainstem and project to the thalamus and the cortex. Compared to the vagal nerve stimulation, the trigeminal nerve offers more accessible areas for the placement of stimulation electrodes. So that's the reason why I select trigeminal nerve stimulation. On the other hand, combined multimodal stimulation is recommended based on the evidence from tinnitus and Alzheimer's disease, since the effect has been shown larger than those of the unimodal stimulation. Given the above evidence, we were interested in exploring the potential effects of multimodal acoustic electric stimulation on consciousness or disorders of consciousness. Therefore, the acoustic electric trigeminal nerve stimulation of consciousness is an appealing approach. In this slide, I will provide an overview of the 4 main empirical chapters of my thesis. The 4 chapters focus on consciousness modulation in healthy subjects and patients with disorders of consciousness. Another chapter focused on consciousness assessment using a hierarchical speech paradigm. This approach aims to provide a multiple assessment for consciousness. The final empirical chapter investigates the neural mechanism underlying a novel treatment for DOC patients. Let's begin with the first chapter. I will assess the modulation effect of acoustic electric stimulation in healthy participants. It's a pre-test, post-test design. So first, we evaluate patients' auditory and tactile perception using a near-threshold target detection task. In this task, participants were asked to report whether they detect a weak stimulation. Next is the stimulation period. The subjects underwent stimulation for 20 minutes, receiving either multimodal acoustic electric stimulation or unimodal acoustic-only or electric-only stimulation for 20 minutes. Then they were asked to perform the target detection task again. We expected an improvement of perception after the stimulation. The results showed after the stimulation, the acoustic electric stimulation, there is an improvement of tactile perception, but not the auditory perception. Then we move to the acoustic-only stimulation. There is no effect on either tactile perception or auditory perception. Same for electrical-only stimulation. So we can conclude multimodal but not unimodal stimulation can improve consciousness tactile perception, but not the auditory perception. Based on the above results, we conclude that acoustic electric stimulation can improve conscious perception in healthy participants. But it would be meaningful to determine whether this approach has also an impact on patients with disorders of consciousness. So that's the aim of our next chapter. Following a similar approach as we used in the healthy participants, we used a pre-test, post-test design again for our examination of patients with DOC. Patients first underwent a behavioral evaluation, which include both the behavioral and the neural assessment using a speech paradigm. I will introduce the speech paradigm in the next few slides. And after assessment is a stimulation period. That's a 5-day stimulation, includes both the acoustic electric stimulation. In order to further explore the frequency specificity, we include a control frequency that is a beta frequency. After the stimulation period, there's a post-test again to assess the consciousness change from pre-test to post-test. However, before investigating the stimulation effect in patients with DOC, it's crucial to establish some reliable indicators for consciousness assessment. So to achieve this aim, we developed a hierarchical speech paradigm as shown in the chapter Consciousness Assessment. The speech paradigm is isochronous words, and this one is used to assess the hierarchical speech processing. For example, if we can track the individual words, then in our brain it also shows a response at the word rate. The same applies for phrases and sentences. As you can see here, there are 3 peaks represent the sentence checking, word checking, and phrase checking. In addition to the hierarchical linguistic processing, we would also like to include more basic processing. So we apply the amplitude modulation on top of the speech, and we expected to observe auditory steady-state response. That's the aim of this side project. We want to see whether the new speech paradigm, including the whether it can help us observe the multimodal hierarchical speech processing and also the more basic auditory steady-state response. We present the subjects with the isochronous amplitude-modulated speech, and what we observed first is the hierarchical linguistic processing. We observed a sentence checking, phrase checking, and word checking. So it replicates previous findings. On top of that, we also observed auditory steady-state response even in the individual words. So it means this new paradigm can evoke both the hierarchical speech checking and also auditory steady-state response. While validating the speech paradigm and auditory steady-state response, we assess the treatment in DOC patients using these indicators. That's the aim of Chapter 4. So first, let's look into the gamma stimulation. We observed an improvement of consciousness and also a rhythmic brain activity. So we conclude gamma acoustic-electric stimulation improves consciousness and increases rhythmic brain activity. Next, let's look into the control frequency, the beta frequency. But we also observed an improvement of the CRSR score, the behavioral consciousness indicator. So we conclude the beta acoustic electric stimulation also improves consciousness. But when we compare the two stimulation groups, we found the gamma stimulation has a larger effect compared to the beta stimulation, since we observed a larger proportion of patients share an improvement of their diagnosis. We have established that the stimulation affects consciousness in both healthy participants and also the patients with DOC. But what's the underlying mechanisms of this effect at the neural level? In this chapter, we investigated alternation in functional brain activity following the stimulation. We have learned from previous slides that pathological unconsciousness is caused by severe brain injury. That's what we learned from previous slides. Further evidence also showed that consciousness loss and recovery coincide with connectivity change between cortical areas. Here we analyze the resting EEG data collected in the DOC patients. So first, let's look into the connectivity in pre-test. After setting a threshold, there's no connectivity between different areas. After the simulation, there's an improvement of the connectivity both within and between widespread cortical areas. So it supports the gamma acoustic electric stimulation can increase resting state brain connectivity within and between widespread cortical regions. So these findings support the global workspace theory, which highlights that consciousness awareness emerges from the information integration widely across different brain regions. Drawing from the 4 empirical chapters, we have discovered acoustic electric stimulation can increase consciousness in both healthy individuals and also DOC patients. That's the main finding. The second one is from the side project. The amplitude modulation in our speech paradigm offers a novel approach to assess oscillatory brain activity and hierarchical linguistic processing. As for the neural mechanism, our data indicates that this stimulation can alter brain connectivity. However, I have to admit, these are all response. We have measured target detection, rhythmic brain activity, ERP connectivity, but this just represents a fraction of the magic consciousness. There are still many other indicators waiting for future exploration, and these are all remaining questions. Thank you for your attention. Now I give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you very much, dear candidate, for this very clear, even beautiful, and also timely summary of your work. I'm really happy with that. I would like to open the opposition by asking the chair of the reading committee, Dr. Benedict Zöffel, affiliated as a rhythmic processing expert in brain oscillations at the Institute of Brain and Cognition, let's call it the Brain and Cognition Research Center, CNRS, in Toulouse, France. Benedict, you have the word.
Yes, thank you. So I'll start by saying that I was I found your thesis, not only your thesis, but also your defense talk really excellent. I think you outlined the research questions and how you tested them very well. I also found your thesis very easy to read because it follows a logical structure and it introduces the concepts and topics very clearly and compactly. And it also follows a nice succession from the acoustic stimulus to the clinical applications. So I do have a few points I'd like to discuss with you. And I'll start with the speech study, where you find that the reaction times are faster and the steady state responses are increased for words that occur later in the sentence. And my question is, in how far do you think that this is a speech-specific effect if we construct an acoustic stimulus that also increases in predictability throughout the trial? Would you think that we can see similar effects, or is this a speech effect?
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your compliments and excellent question. I've also asked myself, like we observed such a monotonic increase of the response reaction time, whether it's just because of a semantic effect or intentional facilitation, or it's just maybe just like a temporal pattern. For example, if we apply just the tone, but the tone with also the similar pattern, where we can observe such a reaction time like decrease. My answer would be maybe no, because there are some papers. There's also one paper from Dr. Lasricki. They presented some predictable tone, but actually there's no difference in ERP, right? And there's also a paper they presented 3 tones, and it's a specific pattern. Then they looked into the reaction time, but unlikely they didn't find a difference within the reaction time across different positions. So I'm not sure whether there's such an effect. It's much more like a statistical analysis, statistical learning. So you can learn the pattern, then whether such an effect can affect your reaction time. But based on this, what I learned from the 2 literatures, maybe there's no such effect. Yeah.
Okay. So you also mentioned speech tracking, and I wondered if you can explain a bit more in detail if you think that if tracking is a mechanism that is mostly important for speech processing, or if this is a more general process in the brain.
If I understood correctly, you are asking about a speech tracking, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, in our early version of the manuscript, we phrased speech tracking as speech parsing, but we got a problem from the review. Maybe it's not the same thing. The speech parsing doesn't equal to the speech tracking, so now we go to the more technical words, so just use the speech tracking, as you can see the title. I'm not sure whether I have updated the title. So I would say maybe speech parsing is much more complicated than the speech tracking. So for speech tracking, as you mentioned in the first question, like just a tone, if we can group the 4 rhythmic tones into a structure, it's also called like tracking or grouping, right? But for the speech parsing, means maybe much more difficult. You need to understand the meaning, not only get the rhythm. So I would say there's still some difference. Like speech parsing might be more hierarchical linguistic processing, but speech tracking is also something high cognitive level, but maybe still something different, like different hierarchical level. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So I have a few short questions on the stimulation and on the underlying neural effects. So you did not only use acoustic electric stimulation, but more specifically, you used musical electric stimulation. So how important do you think is the music part? Would it work also with a different type of acoustic stimulation or only music?
Very good question. When I was working on the design, I was also thinking where we present a tone, because like we can present tone just at the same frequency, 40 Hertz, so it's also acoustic stimulation and it carries a specific frequency. But I was thinking, like for example, for the DOC project, we need to apply the stimulation for 40 minutes and for 5 days. For example, if we just apply the auditory stimulation like D for 40 minutes, it might be very boring and also maybe a bit too demanding. So that's why we use the music stimulation. And also, like in the DOC patients, we selected popular music, so maybe patients know the music, and it can, we hope, like emotional stimulation, they can evoke a much more broad or deeper brain activation. So that's the aim we select music stimulation. But I know like in some animal studies, the tone stimulation carries a specific frequency is also widely used as a rhythmic auditory stimulation. Yeah.
Okay. How about speech? Could you use speech?
Yeah, speech is a very excellent one because speech is very important. And also I feel, yeah, also one paper from Dr. Ricky, so they apply the tactile stimulation, and if the tactile stimulation carries the envelope of the speech, so it's much more like also an amplitude modulation, phase locked, and maybe it can boost the activation. So that's something I was also thinking, maybe we can change the music with just speech, and also for like the electrical stimulation also carries the envelope of the speech. So a synchronized speech and electrical stimulation, and on top of that, we apply the amplitude modulation. So it could be an excellent selection. Yeah. And also regarding the speech selection, maybe we can, for example, some stories recorded from patients' families, and because it's emotional, it can even evoke more brain responses. That would be an excellent one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one last question. So you have two specific findings. You find that it works best for gamma, but you also find that it works best for multimodal and not unimodal stimulation. Do you think there's a brain region that responds selectively to gamma and selectively to multimodal stimulation? Because I wonder if we can extract maybe from this combination of specific findings where the effect is happening in the brain.
Thank you for an excellent question. The reason, so maybe I still need to go back to why we use gamma, why we want to use multimodal stimulation. Regarding the reason why we select gamma, because based on some experimental studies in animals, when they stimulate the thalamus at a gamma frequency, it can modulate the thalamus cortical activation. This loop is very important for consciousness. So I would say the gamma stimulation can modulate or activate oscillation in thalamus. And regarding the multisensory processing, yeah, the first part is the peripheral nerve, then projects to the thalamus, because thalamus is a multisensory relay. So it also activates the thalamus, then projects to the sensory processing, sensory cortex. And regarding the sensory cortex, for example, even the somatosensory is not only responsible for somatosensory processing, it's also like auditory stimulation can also activate the somatosensory area. So regarding your question, I would say thalamus is the most important, and also maybe the sensory processing areas, sensory cortex, somatosensory or auditory cortex. Yeah, but since we use EEG,
okay.
We could, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zerfel. I would like now to pass on the word to Dr. Aurore Thibault, expert in disorders of consciousness and brain stimulation from the Coma Science Group at the University of Liège in Belgium. Aurore, you have the word.
Thank you. But first, I would like also to congratulate. Here we go. Would like to congratulate you for your work and your brilliant presentation, very clear. And I also really liked reading your thesis. I think it was really written in a very elegant way, going from more like fundamental, designing the task, and then applying what you tested in healthy participants into a very complex population of patients, very challenging, which are patients with disorder of consciousness. You really did a lot of work, so a lot of highly quantitative but also qualitative work. So I really appreciated your thesis. And I also think that the first testing TNS in disorder of consciousness is already very challenging, also using such a robust design. So congrats for that. And really applying it in combinations to acoustic stimulation, it's really pushing forward the boundaries in the field of disorder of consciousness. So I must have my first question regarding the reasoning, because you really well explained in your presentation why you decided to use TNS, but I was wondering why combining it with acoustic stimulation. You mentioned that both techniques were more like bottom-up stimulation approaches, so why not choosing like more top-down like TDCS? So why really you choose those two specific techniques, and why you think that the combination could provide more like a synergistic effect?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your compliments and excellent question. So you are asking about why we combine TNS with music stimulation and regarding the mechanism. Why we select these two? That's a very good question. There are some evidence from, as I mentioned in the slides, from the tinnitus and also Alzheimer's disease. So they also use oscillatory stimulation, because we apply the oscillatory stimulation, it's hoped they can entrain the brain oscillation. And when we combine the two stimulations, maybe the entrainment gets larger. So that's the main idea. We want to use these two stimulations. And also regarding why we want to use it in patients, if we just apply the electrical stimulation, I would say maybe it's not less so interesting. If we apply the music stimulation, so more sensory modality than more sensory reconstruction. Yeah, if possible, I would like also maybe include a visual stimulation if the patient can open eyes and focus on the video. Yeah, that would be excellent, because the patient suffers from the sensory deprivation. So in opposite way, we want to have a sensory construction. And regarding the reason why these two might have large effect or the mechanism of multimodal stimulation, there are some excellent studies, both the science study, also nature communication from the cellular level. So when they apply the auditory stimulation, it can also activate the somatosensory area. And at a cellular level, the acoustic stimulation can activate or change the attention of, for example, pre-synaptic attention. And regarding the somatosensory stimulation, it modulates post-synaptic attention. So combine these two, there's a booster effect. But based on our data, I would say it's more interesting explanation is the sensory stimulation, the auditory stimulation and electrical stimulation, they have an integration. It's more like not 1 + 1 = 2, maybe 1 + 1 = 3, or it's larger effect. So that's what we expected. But maybe they also just a simply additive effect, like 1 + 1 = 2. Yeah, but based on both the animal study and at the cellular level, we believe that multimodal stimulation has a larger effect, and it can achieve a larger consciousness restoration in the specific DOC patients. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. And so what kind of clinical effects did you notice with those patients? I mean, do you really think that it was like really drastic, significant improvements in sign of consciousness, or what kind of clinical effect did you notice?
Sorry, could you?
So with the DOC patients, after the stimulation, so you showed an improvement in consciousness, right? So what kind of clinical improvements did you notice?
Yeah, so consciousness assessment is based on the CISR score. Yeah, it's commonly used and it's like a golden standard. And we also look into the subscales And we observed it's mainly the Fisher model, these 2 dimensions. And regarding the Fisher modality, the Fisher dimension, because the Fisher is more sensitive, as there are some behavioral studies they have shown. When there's a consciousness change, normally you can focus on the Fisher, like Fisher tracking. And also regarding the motor stimulation, I would say it's somehow related to our results observed in healthy participants, because we observed some sensory, and regarding the motor area, electric stimulation activates, we included the premotor cortex, so it activates the motor region, so that's why we observed a motor improvement. And regarding the communication, we also observed a minor change of communication, but I know like in DOC patients, most patients show the communication score with 0, and we use a non-parametric test. Just a few patients show a communication score improve a little bit, and with the non-parametric test is significant. This might consistent with our ERP results. Or the speech paradigm, we observe some change regarding the speech indicators. So both the behavior and the neural data support there might be also some communication change. Yeah, that's the 3 dimensions we observed.
Thank you very much. And regarding these motor components, in the introduction, you did not talk about covert awareness or cognitive motor dissociation. Is this something that you think could be important in how you interpret the results, or something that should be better investigated in those 2 studies on disorder of consciousness?
Thank you for a great question. CMD is really a hot topic because it's highly related to the outcome, especially like in acute patient or maybe also the chronic disorders of consciousness. I have to say, based on our paradigm, it might be difficult to say, well, these patients, they are CMD or not. But I noticed a word called like high-level cortex activation, right? Like in passive paradigm, when you present speech, or music, there's an activation, but behaviorally you didn't observe such a response. And it's not a very strong indicator of a better outcome or like consciousness indicator, but it still maybe can be meaningful. That's something we can also conclude from our study. Like in the DOC patients, we observed some patients share a sentence checking, but I wouldn't say these patients, they are CMD or not, because like CMD, they need to understand your command. For example, I asked the participant to please move your hand, and based on muscle activity or brain activation, we observed some change, so they can follow your command. So I would say these patients, maybe they didn't reach such a high level, but still they share some activation based on a brain response, but not behaviorally. But still, these are meaningful, and it might be an indicator of like 1-year outcome. Yeah.
And so is this something you check at the individual level, whether some patients would show increase in brain activity but no behavioral improvement?
Yeah, there are some inconsistencies. Maybe a more direct result is we check a correlation between behavioral change and neural change. Actually, the correlation is not so strong. Like there are some patients, for example, from UWS to MCS, but actually, for example, the gamma oscillation, there's even a decrease. So like as why we show the correlation is not so strong. So some inconsistency between behavior and the neural data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just have a few questions regarding the design of your 2 studies on disorder of consciousness. I'm really impressed by the amount of patients you could enroll. It was both clinical outcome and EEG metrics as well, repeated sessions, so very robust design. So how much people were involved in that data collection? I mean, enrolling so many patients is really a huge amount of work. This is my first question, and could you maybe explain a bit more how the blinding was ensured?
I need to think a bit of the blinding, because there are many steps they use the blinding. So the first thing is the most important thing, the assessor and the patient apply experimentally apply the stimulation, so they should be the different one. For example, we include the participants and we randomly allocated the patients into gamma, beta, and the sham group, and then we there's a clinician, so she will apply the stimulation, but actually we can set a stimulator. So maybe they don't know the stimulation. And after a few days stimulation, the patient's relative, they don't know which kind of stimulation they received. So it's a blind to the patient's relatives. And also for patients. For patients, it's much more easier for DOC patients, but also mainly for their relatives. So they don't know which kind of stimulation they received. And the clinician, and next is the assessor. So the assessor doesn't know the patients received which kind of stimulation. So it's a double blind. Yeah, and regarding the data analysis, so it's me. Yeah, I have to say I know which patients received the stimulation, but I try to use more like use some pipeline. I don't need to manually select which component I need to remain or remove. So try to blind myself. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much again for your work and congratulations.
Thank you a lot, Dr. Thibault. I give the word now to the actual chair of the assessment committee. I misread the list. I apologize for that. Professor Alex Zack, chair of the reading committee and expert in brain stimulation at Maastricht University. Alex.
Yes, thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, first of all, also my compliments to you and your 3 supervisors for an excellent work, a very clearly written thesis, and also for the courage for taking on this topic of consciousness. When I teach at our faculty, the research master students, and I meet them for the first time, and they're eager to start a scientific career, and I ask them what is the topic they really want to contribute to, they all say consciousness, but they never end up doing it because it is too complicated. And also, what we notice in many of the PhD theses that people have the ambition to apply what they find to patients, but they never end up doing it because it's too complicated or too difficult to combine this all into one thesis. And you did both, so from now on I can tell my students it is not completely unrealistic. So congratulations for that. I have a few questions prepared. Some of them were also already discussed, but I want to go back to the last round of questions where you nicely explained why you think the multimodal approach is so promising, but you still haven't really answered why you went for TNS. So I read in your thesis and also in your introduction here, saw that you do that because you actually want to stimulate brain regions. You're talking about the brain, but you're not stimulating the brain, you're stimulating a nerve. And I understand that this is connected to the brain, but why not using non-invasive technique that directly stimulates the brain that you want to modulate, like TDCS, TACS, or TMS? Maybe you can spend a few words on that.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your compliment and nice question. Regarding the TNS, every time I talk to someone, hey, I'm doing some research on TNS, the first question, what is TNS? Next question is, wow, it's so cold. Yeah, I agree, it's a cold stimulation, but I would say compared to a TDCS or TACS, the TNS is more like not stimulate a tiny brain region, it's more like a pathway, a neural pathway. Since we apply the stimulation on the face, it's more broad region, and we can activate the trigeminal nuclear in the brainstem, then project to thalamus to the cortex. That's why we select the trigeminal nerve, but not some other. And regarding a difference between TDCS or TNS, regarding the effect of TDCS, there's still some controversy. Like when you apply the TDCS, maybe the current goes through the skin, and it's also like kind of peripheral nerve stimulation, and also because of the scalp and some software cause the current attenuation. And it goes through, and maybe it's, for example, apply the electrode, it stimulates a peripheral nerve. There's a paper published in Nature Communication from the Belgian group, so they measured when they apply the electric stimulation on the scalp, and it shows it also activates the peripheral nerve. And regarding why we don't use a TMS, because maybe it can localize more specific brain regions. I would say I've tried TMS in my master project, and the result seems promising, but when this time when I did some review on TNS, it seems the result is not so promising and it's not the top option compared to like TES, electric stimulation. So then there are some studies that use the TMS, but the evidence is not so strong and the result is mixed. It's a bit underpowered, so that's why we didn't go to a TMS. But I know TMS is a very excellent measure for. Now it's much more used like combine TMS with EEG and it's used for assessment, but not the stimulation, neuromodulation. For example, they apply the single pulse TMS and simultaneously measure EEG, and they can see the brain excitability change. So I would say maybe we can combine TMS EEG with the TNS. So TMS plus EEG used as a pre-test, post-test, and it's used for assessment of brain cortex excitation. So it would be an excellent approach.
Yeah, thank you. I see that you put some thought into it. My experience are the opposite from what you just described, and I think TDCS and TMS, although of course having also peripheral effects, there are clear also network effects. It's not just selected brain regions, but there are also propagation through networks. So you can stimulate thalamus via connectivity. Another question maybe related to this, at least when it comes to TMS or TDCS, a lot of hype now is focusing on the need to personalize, individualize the treatment parameters, the frequency, but also the intensity. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that and why you in your experiment didn't personalize your frequency or intensity.
Excellent question. Yeah, individualization is really a future aim, I would say, both for TDCS, TMS, or TNS. Yeah, for TNS, I would say because we apply the gamma stimulation and it's a very broad band. It's not like alpha stimulation, so we can first measure the resting state data and we get the individual alpha frequency, then we apply the stimulation at the alpha frequency. That's something used for individualization, individualize the frequency. But regarding the gamma frequency, we mainly focus on 40 Hertz, so it's more like a specific frequency. What we learned from animal studies, when they apply, for example, 25 compared to 40, and they show the 40 Hertz stimulation has a larger effect because the thalamus oscillates at 40 Hertz and it projects to the cortex. This loop, they oscillate at 40 Hertz. So that's why we didn't apply an individual procedure before we apply a stimulation. So maybe it's because of the specificity of the gamma, but maybe for some other frequency band, it's a nice option to apply the individualization.
Thank you. Excellent question. Excellent answer. Sorry, my question was also excellent, of course. Your main finding is very intriguing. It's that you find changes in functional connectivity through your modulation. We also tried for many years to have very specific changes in network connectivity, functional connectivity, using non-invasive brain stimulation. And it was not so easy, but we have now a way using TMS and TACS to really specifically modulate the functional connectivity between brain regions of a network. But to do that, we have to either use a PAS, so paired associated stimulation, where we have two TMS pulses given to two regions with a very specific delay between those pulses that needs to represent the phase lag of these two regions of the transmission time. You know, if you get it wrong, you're not changing the connectivity. The same with TACS. You have to stimulate in phase or out of phase to have specific effect on the connectivity. You just did it by stimulating the peripheral nerve, and you find specific effect on functional connectivity. So what's your secret? Why do you think you have those connectivity effects that seem to be not related to you having to consider those phase lag differences, for example, between the regions?
So thank you for an excellent question. As you mentioned, for the TMS, you need to modulate the phase lag between different pulses. But I first want to highlight a stimulation we use is a continuous stimulation. It's not an intermittent stimulation. But there might also be some phase lag since we use two modalities. So in order to get a larger effect, we also need to measure the phase lag between auditory stimulation and electrical stimulation. And what we did now is just technically ensure these two, they are phase locked. So we generated a stimulation together, like different streams, use MATLAB, and it translates. It projects to the DA converter, so we just ensure the output is synchronized. But since, as you know, I play the music here, and it might arrive to sound might take just a few milliseconds, but for the peripheral nerve stimulation, it might take longer. So there might still be some phase lag, especially for gamma frequency, like one cycle just 25 milliseconds. So it might be opposite.
Would the easy explanation not be that you just increased cortical excitability, and that translates into changes in connectivity, that your intervention just had a general effect on cortical excitability? Did you control for that?
You're asking like the stimulation, why it modulated a general cortical area?
You have increased excitability, and that then also shows in changes in connectivity, but you didn't really change the connectivity directly. Is that possible?
It could be possible.
Yeah.
And also maybe go more basic, it just modulates some neurotransmitters and it modulates some excitability, then we observe the change of whole brain connectivity. Regarding whether it's a direct effect or indirect effect, so we don't know something. Maybe like if we want to measure a neurotransmitter, maybe we need to get into the MRS or TMS, EEG.
Thank you. Very good answer. Give the word back to the pro-rector.
Thank you, Professor Sack. I give the word to Professor Rainer Göbel, also from Cognitive Neuroscience, Maastricht University. Rainer, you have the word.
Yes, first, thank you, Pro-Rector. I first want to also congratulate, dear candidate, you for your excellent work. As we have heard, and I fully agree, it's amazing work, it's a lot of work. And also the thesis has this very clear development from developing a paradigm, testing it on healthy subjects, and then going into patients. It's very, very impressive. My questions, first I want to tell you that when I was a young student, it was a time where it was not normal that we use the word conscious so much, like you use in your thesis. And I just want to say that we were always asked by our supervisors, try to if we work on healthy participants, I'm not talking about patients for now, I'm talking about your chapter 3, where you basically applied this on detection thresholds, and you find response criteria changes with your work. And you, for example, have this very nice title, Multimodal Acoustic-Electric Trigeminal Nerve Stimulation Modulates Conscious Perception. So do you think if you would term your title and would use in your chapter 3 more words like our treatment modulates the response criteria or change detection thresholds without the word consciousness, would you think for this fundamental study, not talking about patients, would you lose anything, or do you think you have to use the word conscious for the healthy subject part? How you motivate that?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your compliments and nice question. If I understood correctly, you are asking about chapter 3, so where we can use like remove consciousness, just for example, perception or something?
Yes, for example, specify, so the word conscious is a very broad term, right? It means so many different things, as you have also nicely described in your introduction. Would it not be more specific if you replace it here and there with the more specific effects you have found? For example, detection thresholds have changed by my stimulation, or we have found the response criterion has been modulated. Instead, it's always said, you change conscious perception, right? My point is, could it be sometimes not better to use the more specific effects than this general word consciousness?
Thank you for the explanation. Yeah, as I mentioned, consciousness is really multifaceted. Like, sometimes I feel very difficult to tangle, like it's perception, it's attention, or it's a consciousness, exactly. I don't know. And as we know, until now, there's a really commonly accepted definition of consciousness. What is consciousness? Maybe everyone has different answer, and also what is the really neural correlate of consciousness? And regarding chapter 3, we use is a study in healthy participants, and when we go back to the methods used for consciousness evaluation, especially in healthy participants, there are mainly two ways. One is that's what we use, the near threshold detection. So detected, undetected, then we compare these two, we get neural correlates of consciousness. And the other one is called a masking. So yeah, it's a different way to explore consciousness. And I couldn't find a more direct way. Just, for example, this indicator is a perfect indicator of consciousness. So that's why we use the AAN, awareness-related component, and I phrase it as a consciousness perception. But it can also be like more perception paper. But since we mainly compare the effect between close to the threshold and is close related to consciousness, it's not like a easy detected stimulation and we compare something, so maybe above threshold. But now we mainly focus near threshold and we compare when we control the intense stimulation intensity, although they are very weak, and then we compare the brain responses. So it's perception, but it's also consciousness.
Thank you so much. I think, yes, I fully agree with you, and I'm really happy. I'm really happy that we can now discuss our findings in these terminologies. So I'm really happy about how you did that. There's an echo. Is there an echo? Okay, I want to go to my second question, which is about, and I think what you answered to Dr. Sack before, I think I know the answer already, but let me ask you, did you hear about the perturbational complexity index, which was introduced by Massini in Milan and also has been used by Stephen Lorries and colleagues in Liège for discovering the state of consciousness by calculating a complexity index. And I have heard you saying and writing about this, but it is actually a technique which you alluded to combines TMS and EEG, because you knock on the brain, you disturb the brain, and then you look how this kind of reflects in the response measured with EEG from this kind of transient stimulation. And the interesting point is that these researchers found that this can be applied to measure the state of consciousness in the different cases you have described, like UWS, like minimal conscious state, so without having the patient to respond in any way. So do you know this measure?
So you are talking about PCI, right? Perturbation Complexity
PCI,
Index. Yes. And yeah, I know this method has been used in DOC, but I've never used it. What I use TMS is just treated it as a neuromodulation method and try to modulate consciousness. And regarding the PCI, I think it's related to the IIT theory. So the consciousness arises from the complexity of the specific region, like it's a math theory, so I don't know much details of this one, but I know PCI is related to this theory. So when you apply the stimulation, it can cause the brain activation or make the brain more complex, and there's a balance between the integration complexity, and then the PCI is used to measure this level, and this one is highly related to consciousness, as there are some paper from the Belgium group, the Coma group. So there's the PCI to distinguish, for example, MCS, UWS, and healthy participants, like the PCI above 0.3, then it might be the MCS. If lower than the 0.3, then it might be a UWS. So this indicator can be used to distinguish different levels of consciousness. And if we want to combine to our stimulation study, it can be used in pre-test and post-test. We can check. So maybe it's a more sensitive indicator compared to some behavioral indicator. We found some change. For example, in pre-test it's 0.3, then it goes up after the stimulation. It might point to some improvement as well, like the brain complexity change or something. Yeah.
Exactly. That was exactly where I wanted to go. Thank you so much. If I may have a short final question.
Yeah.
Okay. My last question is very, very brief. because you mentioned already autonomous theory, IT theory, and they separate P consciousness, phenomenal consciousness, from excess consciousness, right? Which is related to this communication in the brain and complexity in the brain. So do you think that your stimulation affects more P consciousness or excess consciousness?
Wow, this one is super difficult question. Every time I read the papers regarding excess consciousness or something, I feel difficult to get into. So I can just speculate, maybe excess consciousness. I'm not sure.
I would say the same. I think you affect excess consciousness. Without that, the person, if he is, cannot speak, cannot respond. But I think the networks you affect are more those discussed in excess consciousness. Thank you so much for your answers.
Thanks a lot, Professor Rainer Göbel. I pass on the word now to Professor Dr. David Linden, expert in translational neuroscience from the Medical Faculty of Maastricht University. David.
Dear candidate, also my compliments to you and your promotion team for this very interesting and highly translational work. I would like to focus on chapter 4, in particular on pages 119, 120, where you describe the longer-term outcome, the one-year follow-up of your patients. I don't know whether you have your thesis.
The table?
Yes,
okay.
The supplementary table, table S1.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Could you just walk us through the long-term, the one-year follow-up? What did you find? How did you do it? I think you interviewed family members, and what was the functional outcome of the patients where you had the opportunity to do this follow-up?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for this thank you for the compliment and this excellent clinical question. Regarding the GSE score, it would be excellent for all kinds of questionnaire if you can do it yourself, because for clinicians, you are trained, you know more of like the really weak performance, but unlikely it's very difficult to keep the patients in hospital for 1 year, as we did like 1 year outcome. So what we did is a telephone call, and we made an interview, and we also make a recording. So the GRSE score is from 1 to 8, from death to the high level complete recovery. And it's not only one question, so it's a structured question. It's more like a structured interview. So we ask the participant how the state of the patient, whether the patient requires some life support or some care, or whether they can go out, whether they have been able to work. That's all structured questions, and based on these structured questions, we get the score of the GSE score. And as I mentioned before, we also make a telephone recording. So there's another expert, so they can check the recording, and they check the score, whether the score is correct or not.
And could you just describe the range of outcomes you had in this follow-up?
Yeah.
So, for example, what was the best outcome?
Best outcome, I think, is 4, so they can live at home alone, like for 8 hours, but none of them can go back to work. That's something, a bit frustrating.
I think you even had one person with a score of 5.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. So that means the patient can stay at home for more than 8 hours, if I remember correctly. The 4 and 5 is the difference between the hours, right? There are some experts of DOC. So the patient can stay at home, and they don't need a caregiver, so they can stay at home, but they couldn't go outside, like go shopping or go back to work.
And I mean, it's difficult to speculate on this, but what would you say has your treatment contributed to their positive outcome? Because the treatment was applied for just a week.
Yep.
You had some effects pretty immediately.
Yep.
So is there something you could say about this, or whether perhaps in the future this kind of treatment should be incorporated on a more regular basis, in your view, in rehab settings to improve outcome longer term?
So if I understood correctly, you are asking 2 questions.
Yes.
One is the outcome is caused by our treatment, whether treatment can last for such long, and whether in the future it should be used for as a regular treatment. Regarding the first question, I would say it's difficult to say the stimulation effect can last for one year.
You can shortly finish your answer.
Okay. But I would say maybe the patients, for example, they preserve a higher connectivity or higher brain response, then they can respond more to the stimulation. Then it's more like a responder to the stimulation is a predictor of 1 year outcome. And regarding whether it can be used in regular routine, it needs further validation, more clinical trials, larger sample size, more evidence before the doctor can prescribe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Linden. Dear candidate, the time appointed to defending your thesis has passed now. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and also your defense. I kindly ask you and also the audience to await our return in a sec.
Thank you.
Mrs. Min Wu. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Dr. Rieke is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with the Dutch university custom, and I give the floor to Lars now.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
So by the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee that is present here, I hereby confer upon you, Min Wu, the degree of doctor and grant you all the rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with a degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university.
You can already go on.
Okay, so dear Dr. Wu, dear Min, first of all, let me congratulate you and your family on this fantastic achievement. You did really great, and I think we all witnessed that you're really an excellent researcher and that you're really on top of your topic. And here I just want to take the opportunity to reflect on some of the memories and experiences that we shared during this project, which I think really deserve to be shared here in public. Just to tease you a bit. So, yeah, first let's look back at your arrival in the Netherlands. So when I remember when you first came here, I mean, this was the first time you actually left your own country. I think this was the first time you went abroad. And, well, you left your family behind. Your husband was left in China. And yeah, this was a big step. You made a big step into a completely different culture with tall people on bicycles and who are very direct and also with very difficult housing conditions at the beginning. I remember this was a tough start. And yeah, also the language. I mean, this is maybe not obvious now, but at that time even there was a language barrier. So I remember when you arrived, we made a round, I introduced you to our lab and to our new colleagues. And when we first met Professor Formisano, he simply asked, "Oh, nice to meet you. How was your flight? Everything okay?" And at that time he was just shaking. Just didn't know what to say. And it is hard to imagine nowadays, but I think, yeah, at that time, yeah, you were very nervous. So I thought maybe it's good to start out slowly. So I said at the beginning, maybe it's just get over the jet lag, get the bicycle, find the Albert Heijn, and so on. So to take it easy. But then already after 2 days or so, you knocked on my door and said, "Can you give me some work? Are there any other projects that I can work on?" I said, "Oh, okay, that goes quick." And then yeah, I remember that at that time, Bettina and I, we were working on a project on the Eustachian tube, something which was totally unrelated to your project. And I thought, okay, maybe if you need some work, yeah, this is what we are doing. And then I think already a day later, you gave a complete summary of the anatomy of the peripheral auditory system. And yeah, I was pretty overwhelmed, I have to say. And at that time, I also received an email from your former supervisor, Professor Lu, who wrote, and I re-looked it up, "Wu is one of my most proud students, and I'm sure you can teach her more." I think, yeah, maybe this was just a warning. Yeah, it was, because then I think when we started with the first study, you told me that I really need your help with MATLAB. My MATLAB is not so good. And then when you showed me your first code, it was perfectly written out and spelled out. And I think at that time I realized that I think I was totally underestimating you. So yeah, that's how we started. And then I mean, also maybe not obvious here, your project really had some very serious obstacles. So there was the COVID period, we had the cyber attack. So there were really times where, it's really not easy to conduct research. But even this you solved more or less by yourself very elegantly, because you told me, the labs are closed, we cannot measure, but I can measure my previous lab. So can't we do a patient study? We can measure 80 DOC patients. And I mean, this is something that you organized yourself, and which was also, I think, really a turning point in the whole project, because I mean, my vision of this project would be that we would investigate temporal attention, the auditory system, but you actually managed to get me into the DOC domain, and then the project really took a much more clinical turn, and I'm glad. Thank you so much for giving the project that turn. And when we had our weekly meetings, you were always super well prepared. I was always late, so I apologize one more time for all the delays, and thanks for your flexibility. And I mean, I really learned a lot from you also in these meetings, for example, on dynamic causal modeling, and especially on DOC. And actually you showed that you have very good leadership skills. So in that sense, you really led me through various topics. And I mean, maybe the thing that impressed me the most, and I really admire that, how effectively you handled all the feedback. So I remember doing one of the evaluation meetings, you said, so any things that I can improve? No? I said, okay, maybe you can still improve your written English, and the scientific writing was tough at the beginning. And I said, you also need to network a little bit more, go to conferences, talk to people. And you immediately took this to action. So then I think on your next holiday in China, during the holiday, you took English classes. And I said,
Just for fun.
it was for fun, okay. And then also you went to this conference together with Elia in Magdeburg. And then when you came back, you immediately had attracted an expert on dynamic causal modeling, the person who is really a big shot in the field, and you managed to get him to start up a collaboration with Richard from the Max Planck Institute in Berlin. So then even later you were invited to give a talk there, and it's just, whatever I said, you immediately took it very successfully into action. So but the project is done now. This is amazing. So I mean, within 4 years, you almost have essentially all the chapters published. This is really impressive. And I mean, this despite all the cultural gap, the cyber issues, the COVID, and so on. And even more impressively than during the last part of your project, you wrote your own grant. Now you got the Rubicon grant, which allows you to go to Oxford, to another very prestigious university, and again, to build your network and collaborate there. I also learned in the meanwhile that you even published more papers, even from your master thesis, I think. This also just went all in parallel. So I'm super impressed, and you can be really proud on what you have achieved there. So in conclusion, I can only echo Lou's words. I'm super proud what you have achieved and how you have developed, and I think for your further career, I think only the sky is the limit. So wishing you all the best for this. And then, let me thank you finally for all your efforts, the help with the master students, where you supervised, and most of all, bringing so much positive energy in the lab. So thank you so much, and Fijang Ganxie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rieke. Dear Dr. Wu, I also, on behalf of Maastricht University, the real rector, because I'm just replacing her, and our dean, Harald Merkelbach, of the Faculty of Psychology and Neuroscience, congratulations to this achievement. Be proud, enjoy the day. And there's a nice tradition in the Netherlands is that when a child achieves something, also the family and the partner actually get the credits, because it's context who makes you the way you are. So congratulations to friends, colleagues, and family also abroad and here. Thank you for also the reading committee for your time in this and the entire organization. Formally, I close this session, and I am announcing that the audience is then already free to leave towards the rafter. There will be a reception And we take a photo here now together with the people online. And then later on, we also go to the stairs in the middle of the hall to also make a group photo. But the audience can already leave and already have a drink. Don't